Hello and welcome to the crossover episode of Walking the Earth Podcast and Freedom Lovin Podcast. I'm Justin Castle, this week calling in from New York City, New York.
And I'm Mike Margulies. I am calling in today from Baltimore, Maryland. And Kevin Koskella, welcome to our show, and we're happy to be on yours too, man.
Thank
Uh,
you. Yeah, I was excited to be on your show, and I'm here in San Diego, California.
Awesome. Sweet.
yeah, so we're all stateside right now, as it turns out. And
Yeah, we're
travel
not so
podcast,
we're
so
not
everyone's at home.
yeah, it's not so exotic this time around.
It's a little
Yeah,
wintry up here. The Juno storm kind of fizzled out to nothing.
yeah,
Yeah.
No, it was still snow. It was about a foot of snow where I live, but further east it was way worse. Uh,
actually, yeah, it's a little bit here. That's actually the twist on my end, though, is like I thought I was still gonna be traveling, like a few weeks ago, and I just literally did not get on the plane, um, and just stayed around. It's kind of like for me, Kevin, have you had this kind of experience where like, I was traveling for a long time, and then in a weird way, when I came back, I just felt like I got reconnected, kind of,
Yeah.
with home in a way I hadn't been before.
Oh yeah, it makes everything seem a lot nicer at home when you've traveled
Right.
for a while and you get back, it's like, wow, I really did miss this. And and
Yeah.
and yeah, did you no, no, you got off the plane or you didn't take your plane purposely or you just
Yeah, it was
what happened?
intentional. I mean, well, truth be told, I still can take the flight. I have it was booked with like miles, and so I can take it later as long as I take it within a year. So I just
Okay.
delayed it really.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But it was like the day before the flight, and I was supposed to hop on and go to Indonesia, and then kind of, I don't know, I was really torn. Like I still really love Southeast Asia a lot, but
Mm-hmm.
um, I found I wanted to be close to my family and friends for a while that I hadn't seen for, I'd been here for a couple months, and it wasn't enough yet to,
Yeah.
Yeah.
get back on the road. So
It's really a weird thing because I don't know, a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, I said I'm a permanent traveler.
right,
That's my lifestyle. It's a permanent traveler, perpetual tourist, whatever you want to call it, PT. Like that's what I was
yeah,
kind of like. That's what I'm excited about. But in my mind, also, I wasn't thinking like I just want a permanent like that's just hopping from city to city and country to country, because that can be annoying after a while.
right. Oh,
And
Yeah.
I was absolutely, man.
yeah, and like I love the seeing new things, and then it's really nice to come back to something like where you have sort of a home base and you've got like a group of friends and family, whatever whatever your comfort is, and be able to do that. I think that I would really feel like I was missing out if I just did like I don't know if you guys know Wandering Earl or
Yeah,
uh
Yeah.
some of these guys that are
they
just
just go
like
forever.
constant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, man. Like I mean, I'll tell you, I would trade the experience for nothing. Like that, the solo backpacking experience, there's nothing like it. But yeah, after a while, you kind of want some stability in your
Right.
life. So,
Yeah.
um,
That's all. And Kevin, I wanted to see like you've been traveling for a while, and I know that you recently went to Colombia, and I think you went on another trip. Like, do you find yourself going on shorter trips now as opposed to like a longer, extended escapade? I suppose do you?
Yeah, that's kind of it's a good question because I sort of thought about that about a year ago, and I was like, I don't know if I really want to do all these really long, like three,
mm,
6 month trips or whatever, or live in other places. I kind of decided this year that I would take more shorter, like 2 weeks here, two
Mm,
weeks there type of thing. And so far, I'm pretty happy with it. That's what I've been doing this for, since the beginning of 2014. And I really, yeah, I really like it. It's just going out somewhere and being able to do work on the road,
yeah.
not being like,
right,
oh, I'm on vacation for 2 weeks, which is what everybody, of course, says,
right.
But
So you
Yeah.
can travel more than just the allotted 2 weeks you're given by some employer or whatnot.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, but you're coming back to San Diego not because you only have 2 weeks, but because hey, you want to have a
Right.
base, and yeah,
Exactly, exactly.
yeah,
And I actually feel like talking about earlier, you guys were talking about earlier, is the idea of, things kind of seem fresh when you get back. And it's
yeah,
it's like
Yeah.
San Diego to me is pretty much it's kind of a paradise. But if I stay here, if I'm only here, I kind of don't really appreciate it. And then when I leave and come back, then I'm like, wow, this place is really amazing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, it's like I just feel like my heart is kind of torn, you know. As I do, I think if you ask me what I prefer, like lifestyle wise, I mean, for me, hands down, the lifestyle in a place like Chiang Mai, Thailand, is second to none, you know. And
Yeah.
if I could have, the only problem is it's the other side of the world. So,
Yeah.
and so, you know, this big part of me like feels like I really belong there. Yet, uh, you know, this is where I grew up. This is where my family is, my friends, and so I guess where I'm at now is like, well, I'll go back when I kind of get recharged. Like, you know, once I get my fill, and maybe I'll have the experience you had, Kevin, where I'm like, I'm here for too long, and like, all right, then now it's gotten to be not as exciting anymore or something, and then when I'm ready full on.
Do you guys do? I know both of you guys have traveled quite a bit, but have you done a lot of long-term stays in like U.S. cities
Um, well,
outside of New York?
outside of New York, I not really. I mean, I've visited San Fran, I've visited L.A., and other parts of the U.S., but not really. No.
Yeah, I mean I lived in DC area and in Houston. You know, that was when I was like working. I don't know if you mean like was I living in I wasn't doing and staying the same way you would like when I was in Thailand, for example. I was
Yeah.
just, you know, working a typical, you know, job, and
Yeah.
the most I've done as far as staying somewhere and just kind of really just taking the time to explore within the US was you know, maybe a week or so in somewhere, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because that's one thing that I've sort of a couple of years ago decided that was sort of a compromise. Like I really wanted to live in the mountains. That was one of my I've never lived in the mountains. I've
Yes.
always
Love
lived like on the
mountains, man.
coast. Yeah, and so I decided to go to Colorado for 3 months, and I'm like I could easily do Colorado for 3 months, and I'm
Sweet.
not a
Yeah.
winter person, so yeah, so I went in the summer when it's nice and warm, but yeah,
I'm really
and
thinking
I
about
just
doing that actually.
I
So maybe I'll have to get some tips from you. Colorado's nice in the summertime.
awesome in the summer. Yeah, it rains a little bit more than I thought. Like I was surprised it pretty much almost every day it comes down like in the afternoon, thunderstorm rolls in, it rains for like an hour or two and then it's done. But
mhm.
the temperatures are great. I mean, it's really nice and
Yeah.
there's a lot to do. I mean, it's beautiful. There's tons of hiking and biking and like whatever. It's yeah, it's really cool place.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. How long were you out there?
Yeah, just for 3 months. I went in
Cool.
June and I was like kind of just open to whatever happened. I went to Boulder and I was gonna come back after 2 months because I wasn't really, I mean, it was nice. Like I said, it was a lot of stuff to do, but I was kind of feeling like Boulder wasn't really for me, like that city. I
Right.
mean, I like Colorado in general, but wasn't crazy about Boulder because it's sort of like a college town
Okay.
and it's sort of a suburb. It's sort of like a big, like kind of a suburb. And it's like if you're not in college or raising kids, sort of a weird place to be, I think.
I see.
Oh.
I'm curious. Like I know, I I used to live in Syracuse for about 5 years before I moved to New York City, and a lot of the folks that were living in Syracuse were talking about Colorado is where I want to go. Colorado is where I want to be. I don't know if that's just like an East Coast thing. Like, oh, Colorado's it's very cutting edge. They're very cutting edge with like laws. They've got snowboarding and a lot of very progressive things there. Is that a
Legalized marijuana.
yeah? That's I
Yeah.
wasn't gonna say
Let's
that.
cut to the chase.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. They allow weed. Allow that out there.
It's like that goes with the same attitude, though, right? That it's like
Correct.
kind of a relaxed environment that pretty people are, yeah, pretty progressive and laid back. That's the
Right.
sense I have of it. I've only been myself, also, you know, out there for ski trips and whatnot. But
I've never been, but that's kind of the
okay,
mentality or in the lore, I guess, of for
right.
people like myself who've never been there. Do you feel like that's the case on the West Coast also? Like that, like it's a common feeling of a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I stay in California because people tend to go west to start their lives over or to start
Mm,
something. And
Right.
so it's sort of like it started with the whole gold rush thing in the 1840s, I
Huh.
guess. And
Yeah.
everybody came west because the gold was out in California. And so a lot of people just kind of come here and it's like anything goes, whatever you want to do, it's all good. And people, you could come out here to be a beach bum, or you come out here and start, a startup business, or I mean, it's just kind of like I feel like there's a lot of looking towards the future here, and then there's just a lot of like you said, like kind of relaxed and
Mm.
um, anything, a lot of tolerance, I guess would be the
Right.
word.
Yeah, the West Coast has that same kind of vibe, I think, that
Yeah.
Colorado is sort of known for in a sense. Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, for sure. And I don't know the laws. I think you can, as far as like my lifestyle goes, you can set up freedom no matter where you are. You can kind of
Mm,
make your life free, and no matter what the laws are or whatever, it doesn't
right.
really matter. And that's kind of been my philosophy, is like just build your own freedom. Don't
Yes.
wait for other people to don't necessarily move somewhere just because like, oh, it's a little bit more free over here. It's like you can
Right.
still do that.
Actually, I love that, man. That's actually a good way, a better way of phrasing kind of the things I was going through emotionally myself. Because in my head, it's like I had this idea of I love the lifestyle, right? The freedom I had when I was out backpacking.
Yeah.
And then, like right before I got on this flight, I was thinking to myself, well, wait, maybe I can make that same kind of freed lifestyle, here in the U.S. If I maybe just try for it, I can do that and do it here. Establish a base. Not that I'm still gonna be traveling more, but instead of looking for a new base, why don't I make
Right.
the base right
Right.
here, the place I already have it?
Exactly. And I think I've exhausted like almost everywhere now. I haven't been to Eastern Europe, but I've been to a lot of places where I'm like, oh, maybe this would be the spot to settle down in. But it's like you really just come back. It's like you're still living your same life, even if you're in a place that's like different and cool and laid back and more free or something. But yeah. Mike, what did you think about Chiang Mai? Like, what was it that you liked about it that you
Yeah.
said that you could saw yourself staying there for a while?
Yeah, so I did actually end up spending, I think it said 3 or 4 months there. In
Yeah.
this, now I was out of the country for about 15 months total, of which 3 or 4 of them were in Chiang Mai. And what I loved about it was, I mean, and obviously the cost of living is a huge factor for sure. That can't be.
Oh yeah.
It's I'm not
Well,
going
you
to deny
can't
it.
wait. You can beat it because you can go to Cambodia and live for like half the price of Chiang Mai.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess there are Yeah, there are definitely parts of Cambodia that can be cheap, or India. Go to live in
Yeah,
Goa or something, right? And you
that's
get
true.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. There are even cheaper ones that relative to say where I am now, though, in the U.S. I'm finding it's a lot pricier, and also just things like getting around are more difficult.
Right.
Like if I'm, and maybe that just comes down to price too, because I could, find a tuk-tuk or whatever, and here I can still Uber around everywhere. It just costs me 10 times the price.
Yeah.
So that's a big factor. But also there's, I felt like Chiang Mai was it is that a kind of a relaxed, it just felt like a lot more relaxed. There's a lot less pressure, and you just kind of have freedom and space to kind of do your thing, and there at the same time as you had this freedom, and there were also, I was able to get things done. You could meet a lot of people, a lot of other, the digital nomad folks in the co-working spaces, so
Mm-hmm.
that you could get stuff done, but also have this relaxed lifestyle for a low cost of living, all these kind of factors. And it's also just interesting being in Asia, this place that's
Yeah.
vastly different. And I
Right.
liked it as I was going along. I learned a little bit more Thai. Not that I can speak any conversational Thai at this one, but as I learned a little bit more, started to pick up on a little bit more things and learning more. Just it's an interesting place to be.
Yeah.
Have you been out there?
Yeah. I did about 3 weeks in Chiang Mai in 2013.
Cool.
So yeah. I was the same way. I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it. It was one of those things like you come from Bangkok where it's just absolute insanity, and
Right.
the
Like
traffic is probably
man,
the worst in the
I hate
world. And
Bangkok so much.
yeah, I do too. I really hate Bangkok. I mean, other than the fact that it seems like a really safe big city. Like I always feel safe there, and
Mm.
maybe I'm just being naive, but it's
I
it
always just
seems
feel like lost there. Man.
it's just massive concrete and buildings. I mean, I don't really know. I know some people like Bangkok, and I know even there's a lot of digital nomads that hang out around Bangkok, but I don't get it. I don't understand. It's like
Mm.
it's one of the hottest places on earth, I think, where the humidity
Yeah.
is like
And
it's just
the other thing, though, I mean, for me, I think I also just tend to be a guy who's more into the small towns than the big cities, and
right.
whether it's Bangkok or New York City or whatever, like I think for me personally, the smaller towns speak to me in the sense that like you get to be, I don't know, there's just this warmth to people when there's less people. And
Yeah.
so
Right.
for me, that's nicer. And so, I mean, when I tried living in Saigon, in Vietnam, which is another hub, for these digital
Yeah.
nomads,
Mm-hmm.
I tested that out because I'd heard good things about it. And I had a great experience there for all these different reasons. But ultimately, it was like, well, for me, Chiang Mai was a better fit, you know?
Yeah.
And so, um,
Yeah.
maybe Baltimore's not a bad place for me then. It's still a city, but it's smaller
Yeah.
than big city, some of the bigger ones, you know?
Right.
It's funny. I had the same experience with Saigon. I did
Yeah.
about a month there, and I was like, okay, got it. I think it was kind of cool,
Yeah.
but definitely not somewhere I could stay for very long. And I don't, yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's so crowded and polluted, and it's just like, yeah, no thanks.
Yeah. As big cities just freak me out sometimes.
Yeah.
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 That's
I don't know why I submit myself to this torture of living in New York. I'm crazy. Well,
you're in the center, dude, for like what you're trying to do in the comedy scene, you know.
Yeah.
So you're in the thick of it. And I'm not saying that big cities are a terrible thing. I'm not
No.
trying to like make a judgment on all big cities are bad, but I think for me personally, it's just I'm a smaller town kind of guy.
Right.
You know?
I'm just giving you guys shit.
Yeah.
But you know what?
Fair enough.
But you know what? I'm learning. You got to spend time if you really want to meet people in a city. You need to be in a city for a while. You can't.
Yeah, it takes longer.
It takes longer. And when we were talking, Kevin, to Leon Logothetis, who traveled the world by motorbike, and he did. I don't know if you're familiar with his story. Do you need?
Yeah, I listened to part of that show actually. Yeah.
Oh, sweet,
Cool.
awesome. Yeah. So for people who haven't heard it, he basically traveled around the world on a yellow motorbike, didn't bring any money or food, and only relied on the kindness of strangers to get him around the world. And I found it, he said the same thing. It's the cities are kind of difficult, but there's still people there that helped him along the way. But in these smaller towns and other places, like there's just I guess they're a little bit more receptive because of the culture, I suppose.
Right.
Small town versus big city, hustle bustle.
Yeah. Well, if you're in a big city, it's just obviously you're automatically you have to shut people off.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just
Exactly.
I think it's just a natural thing that happens.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's a tough balance because you want to be in the kind of the action, but because if you go too far out, then it's like you're not meeting anybody. But
Exactly.
yeah,
And that was that was like an adjustment for me coming back to the U.S. too. We talked about this a couple episodes back where it was just being used to people being so receptive as to a stranger when I'm the stranger versus when you're coming back into the U.S. and into big cities, then it's not the same, But I think what you said is, I think Justin, you were saying this, that like you can make really good connections. It just takes longer, You just have to invest more, and
Definitely.
then maybe it's a better payout, ultimately. As if you're living a transient lifestyle, you're backpacking, you're going to meet so many people so easily. It's like the easiest thing in the universe when you're backpacking to make friends, but they're ultimately transient relationships.
Yeah.
So it's like there's two sides to the coin. Whereas back home, it's harder to meet people than that maybe, but when you do, those relationships go deep.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So,
Kevin, I was curious. This might be a 180 or whatnot, but you were in Australia, and you were married, and you read a book, and that kind of spurred you into, this whole freedom movement, I guess, of getting out there and doing things that you wanted to do. Is that a good way to summarize that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was already kind of on that mindset because that's why we actually went to Australia, because it was like, we can do it. We both had, jobs, or she had a job, I had a business that we could travel with. So that was kind of how we ended up going to Sydney. And but yeah, I think reading that book was really eye-opening. It's called How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World, because I think my focus then was like about all the things that aren't free. And how, everything's limited, and we shouldn't have to do this, and why do I have to do this and that, and like, it'll drive you nuts, because there's so many parts of life that you could look at as like, that person's stopping me from being free, and this situation here is stopping me from being free. But ultimately, you can control at least some of that, and the more you can do on your own is in terms of creating freedom. Obviously, the more free you're going to be. So that's really what the book did, is it made me kind of wake up to like, look, I'm in control of a lot more than I think I am. And that's what I think a lot of people don't really realize. And it can be anything from like the situation you grew up in. Some people think, oh, well, this is how I grew up. This is how I'm always going to be. Like, why? How could I change? But they really can change, and they don't see it. And
Right.
so, and you know, to something like people that are really into like political movements, they don't realize that this isn't going to change. They aren't going to become happier because they got involved in this political group, but they think they are. So it's like, it's really,
Right.
you know, it's really
Yeah.
something that, yeah.
That's a really interesting. I appreciate that perspective a lot, you know, because we do tend to look at something negative, like who's holding me back, you know, and
Yeah.
fight it. And I
Yep.
think there's something to say for rather than instead of fighting against something that's wrong, you can try to build something positively that's good.
Yeah.
You know,
That's a great way to put it.
yeah. So yeah, I dig that view, man.
I dig that viewpoint. I dig that viewpoint also. I think it can be applied to relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't fight.
Absolutely.
Don't fight something that's
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
all
it's,
try
it's
to.
like
Yeah.
it's like you're trying to change the person that you're with to
Right.
exactly what you want. It's
No,
like,
you-
how often is
Yeah.
that going to work?
that
Well,
does.
we're always trying to find the bad guy, right? Like,
Right,
and it's
right.
very easy when you're looking to like find a bad guy. Like, this person's oppressing me. This person's not giving me my freedom. You can always find this person's an asshole. You're always gonna find an
Yeah.
asshole. You're always gonna find the bad guy. But what I think the more difficult thing is just to not always fight all those fights and maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I always try to look internally to myself. Like, okay, where's the bad guy inside of me that I can make better?
Right.
So
Right.
I
Exactly.
work on that.
Definitely. And I think that's definitely a thing that once you travel the world, I think it makes you, or at least talking to you guys are very relaxed people. I feel like can get along with a lot of different folks. So I think that'd be hard because there's so many relationship options and you're constantly going all these different places. Like, it's how do you meet somebody that's you'd give it all up for, I guess, or maybe you don't give it up. It's
You mean
the
as a
person.
traveler?
Yeah, it's you don't give it up. It's the person
I don't think you
that
give it up.
inspires,
I don't
that
know.
gets along with you, that inspires you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, I'll let you kind of chime in on this too. But for me, I would say to someone I'm compatible with is probably going to have a similar mindset to me anyway, and want to travel and do these things also.
Yeah, that's the thing is I think that you really just need to look for people that have, like you said, mindset. It's like the growth mindset.
Yes.
Are you growing or are you just stagnant?
Yes.
Yeah.
And if
That's
somebody
that's
has
a really good way to
that,
put it too. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like you can definitely find people that travel that have that. And I think that's
Yeah.
a really great place to go. But yeah, it's tough when you're really, and that's the other reason to cut back and not be like on the road constantly, but
Yeah.
to date anybody. I mean, how do you do
Give
that
yourself
when
a
you're like,
chance.
oh, I'm here for 3 months and then I'm gone, then I'm off
Right.
for another place for 2 months, and
Yeah.
it's tough. But there's a guy, Colin Wright. You guys know who that is?
I'm
No.
not familiar.
Colin, I think that's his name. I interviewed him on my podcast. Yeah, he's been doing this stuff for a long time too, and he travels and writes books and does that kind of thing. And yeah, we got talking about that, and he just has this kind of attitude. It's like, yeah, I'm just straight up upfront about it right away, and I'm like, yeah, I'm only going to be here for 2 months, so
Right.
it's and I guess that has its advantages and disadvantages too.
Right.
So.
Sure. Well, for me, I still have this fantasy now. Like, I've done this solo backpacking thing for a while, and now it would be cool in some future day, whatever it is, whether it's in a few months or in a few years or whatever, if I'm like in some relationship with someone who I really love and feel connected to, and then we go do it together, because and that would be a different experience. That would also be awesome, and maybe it would take away from some of what's difficult about the backpacking experience when you're kind of what ultimately it's in is the transience makes loneliness feeling. But if you're with someone the whole time, maybe that's a whole different thing. You
Right.
probably want to go home eventually to a base at some point, but
Yeah.
still. But yeah, I think that'd be cool too.
Kevin, have you seen Janipur?
Janiper, no, I don't think so.
It's a movie about a guy. It's Tom Allen. Is that right, Mike?
Yep.
Who travels around he basically goes on a world journey, and then he meets a love of his life along the way. It's a documentary that he did himself, and then they wind up biking together and keep traveling together.
Is there a spoiler alert we need to put here?
Yes. Pretty much everything that I just said.
Yeah. That sounds pretty awesome.
It's still an amazing. It's still a great movie, and you should definitely see that. Like, have you been in that position? Have you been in the position that Mike's talking about and that movie kind of references?
Like traveling with someone?
Yeah. Have you met somebody to travel with?
I tend to travel better solo.
Yeah,
I'm actually
it's
planning a
easier.
trip.
It's
I'm actually
definitely
planning a
easier.
trip right now with somebody, but it is easier. Yeah, it's much easier to travel solo because I actually went on my first really big solo trip. I was planning on going to Bali and just kind of like cruising around Southeast Asia and not really having any plan. And a female friend here wanted to go with me after she heard about my idea. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? I wasn't like dead set on anything. And then we got there and we really didn't get along at all. It was really a bad
Uh-oh.
match.
Wow.
Yeah, someone to travel with. So
I mean, I don't want to get into the details, but so was it just it just do you think it was a product of the environment, or there was an underlying like thing from the beginning, and it just this exposed it, being under pressure exposed it? Like,
exactly. The second part was definitely more of it than anything. And I don't know. I still don't know. I'm not friends with this person anymore, but I don't know what it was. But yeah,
right.
she did. I mean, in my perspective, she really couldn't handle making a decision together. And it just got to where it was like she just kind of blew up on me one day, and I'm like, okay. And she's like, "Oh, I'm leaving." And so it was like, okay, I guess we're not traveling together. That's fine. I was actually really happy. I mean, I was like, okay, well, like go ahead, that's fine. And the next day I woke up and I was like, wow, I'm so happy. And the trip was.
You reminded me of the scene in Austin Powers too. After what's her face is a fembot, and he goes, "Wait a tick, I'm single again."
Vanessa.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Vanessa's a fembot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's tough. I mean, I had such a good time traveling around solo that, I mean, I was there for like 2.5 months, all over Southeast Asia, and I just would never have wanted it another way. I just could not have imagined being with somebody for that long, just trying to make group decisions. And it's just so much easier when you can go, you go somewhere and whatever your feeling is about the place, you can just make a decision. You're like, okay, I love this place. I want to stay here for like 3 more days at least.
Right.
Or you're just like, nah, I'm kind of not into it. I'm just going to leave tomorrow.
Yeah.
Whereas you have someone else there, they're going to have their own opinion. Like, well, why do you want to leave? Or why do you want to stay?
And stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? Maybe I think the way if and when this happens for me, I kind of envision it like it would be flexible, so you'd be together, but maybe sometimes you go off on your own little adventures and then reconverge,
Yeah.
I think that would be like maybe a healthy way to approach it, probably.
Yeah. That sounds ideal. I don't know anyone that's actually pulled that off, but
I think I've met people that do that actually, because I met like some couples and I was in Cambodia, and then like I met just the one guy. They were still like together as far as I knew, and I met the one guy by himself later, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna meet up later." So I think there are people
Mike,
that can pull that off.
What about when our friend Justin went and visited you? Didn't he do that? Didn't he like?
Yeah, actually, yeah. So our a friend of Castle and I, his name is also Justin, Shunik. He came to Thailand to visit me for a couple of weeks, and that's basically how it operated. When he came, we were hanging out together, but we weren't attached to the hip. He went off on some of his own adventures, and I went off on some of my own. I was kind of living in Chiang Mai, so I had like different activities I was into, and so yeah, that's exactly how we did it. We were hanging out. We saw each other pretty much. I think we saw each other every day. I think, and hung out a very large part of the time, but we weren't always together. You know,
sounds like a theme park.
Yeah.
We're meeting up at 3 p.m.
Well, you don't even. Well, that's the thing is you don't even schedule the time to meet up necessarily. You just say, all right, well, we'll stay in touch, and then reconvert. It's like that's the thing that's tough is there's so much. I'm used to not having to plan, and now I have to plan again here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you feel like? Yeah. Is this for you also, Kevin, in the U.S. that you're planning more than you would when you're?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally. I mean, everything's a lot of things are much more planned. But yeah, I was going to say I did 2 trips in the last couple of months. I went to Colombia, and I went with 2 friends. Actually, one pretty good friend. The other one is kind of like not a super close friend or anything. And that was one where we had to plan, and it was not what I'm used to. Yeah. Worked out pretty well. One guy was a little bit more uptight than I would want, but but it worked out pretty well. We had a good time. We had a really fun time, and we got to split the cost, which is nice, and got to stay in nicer places and stuff like that. But But then then the next trip I did was Panama, and I was solo. And it's like, there were some things that I did miss about having people with me. It's like just being able to
Right.
say, just refer to people and go, oh, this just happened and that happened. And it's like, when you're solo, you just don't have that kind of reference. You're just kind of like, oh,
Right.
okay. And if you have a bad day, you're just kind of stuck in it. So
Yeah, that part's tough actually. Yeah, when you're traveling solo and you're in a bad place, you don't necessarily have like the support network there, you know. And
Yeah.
you can make
So
friends, but you don't want to like start a friendship with someone just talking about, some negative thing.
yeah, exactly.
Next week, we continue our joint podcast with Kevin Koskella from Freedom Lovin Podcast and discuss challenges faced on the road, getting ripped off, getting scammed while traveling, hear ladyboy stories from across the globe, discuss debt, and going against the grain. It's a very packed episode. You don't want to miss it. So check it out online at WTEpodcast.com. Subscribe to us on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and iTunes. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at WTE Podcast.